tutorial on making a maid-style little housekeeper. This style has 4 main components: apron and dress, then a headband and socks. This is fairly easy to make. The only tricky part is this pleating. The rest is quite easy. It's really easy and can be hand-sewn. Hand sewing may take a bit longer. For this apron, I'm using Velcro. Then the inside looks like this on the outside. The effect is quite good. And this fabric is particularly suitable for making this type of apron. This is a dress. This dress also uses Velcro, and the inside is a white lining. This white one is to prevent it from possibly turning black over time and staining. It may fade. But I will wash it before shipping. It might fade to a skin tone, but I don't know if it will change after washing. So it's best to use a white lining. This is safer, and this is a headband. There is a piece sewn onto the headband. A ribbon is sewn on it. This is also quite simple and easy to make. And this is a pair of socks. The socks are made of knitted fabric. Then this is the sewn checkered webbing. First comes the cutting. This is its layout diagram. This is not meant for cutting. It serves as a reference during layout. Then you arrange it according to this diagram. This fabric is definitely enough. Then this is for the jumpsuit. This is for the apron. The apron and the lining fabric. The apron and the lining use the same fabric. They are both white. And this is my drawing. It's too large. I can only capture part of it. Just follow this blueprint for the filming. The principle of layout is to arrange the larger pieces first. First, finish the larger pieces, then arrange the smaller pieces, like these straight strips. You should draw a cover on it. Then make a mark. Just cut a small section from here, then you can tear it off. After tearing it off, adjust its length. Once you have torn it off, then you can also arrange the ones below. I draw it this way to match it. Clearly mark this position. Then after arranging the large pieces, then arrange the smaller pieces. This fabric edge is its yarn image. All are centered around this edge. Then this yarn image, it is referred to as the yarn image annotation on the fabric piece. This fabric edge, like this. Then let's talk about this. There is a fake door panel at the front. The fake door panel has a fleece board. Sketch this wool board. After the drawing is completed, then place the front piece on. Once the door panel is completed, then place it on and cut it out. This is for the apron. This is the apron cutting. This is how to place it. The apron is also included. After finishing the face, draw it now. I forgot to mention one thing. I didn't mention that mirror, did I? Isn't it one that has seams? It has seams after you paint it onto the board. Now draw this mirror line. Some friends really enjoy drawing mirror lines. The seam at the bottom edge of point 5 has not been removed. It helps in drawing this circular seam. Let's discuss how to use this mirror board. As for this mirror board, it is the seam of the bottom edge that has not been removed. To assist in drawing this mirror line, didn't I draw this before with the seam? Then align the mirror board with the bottom edge. A 0.5 space is also left on this side. Align it like this before you draw. The seams around will be easier to draw. And at the right moment, you need to check if it's even. It may sometimes be misaligned. After aligning it, then you can draw the mirror line. This sleeve is the same. The seam at the bottom edge hasn't been removed. Look for the sleeve, and this one is the black one. It's made of black fabric. This sleeve is the same. Align the bottom edge. This is the front sleeve on this side. Then you need to plan how to draw the seam at the bottom edge. You just remove it, cut this out, then align the top, then cut the bottom part. After cutting, redraw this line. You can do it without cutting. Then you should look for a rough one. I haven't cut it. The approximate position of 0.5 is indicated. That's all there is to the cutting. What you need to pay attention to is the texture of this fabric. It must remain parallel. Arrange it based on the fabric texture. Let's first discuss the cutting of this night punch dress. This is the hem of the skirt. I tore it off by hand, clearly mark its position with paper, then tear it off by hand. Stop for a moment when you tear it to this point. Then cut another opening from this point. Just tear it once more from here. Then fold it in half. Check its length, then ensure the widths are aligned. Check if the width is the same. Otherwise, the garment will have varying lengths. This skirt hem has already been tailored. The rest will be cut according to this pattern. Just cut along the outline drawing, its inner part and the outer layer of the apron. It uses the same kind of fabric. They are all made of white, plain cotton. Take pictures with the same piece of fabric, and then at that moment, cut out the parts you need. Aren't we supposed to do the night punch first? Then take this inner part. There's also a skirt hem. Cut out what is needed here. After finishing the night punch, then make an apron. This can also be torn by hand. It can also be cut with scissors. The inner part doesn't really matter. The fabric piece is required for this overnight project. All of them have been cut. This includes the collar, the inner body, and the skirt. It is made of white, plain fabric. We can now start making the project. Let's start making it. I can't say that it is white thread right now. Then let's begin with the white inner section. This is the collar. There are a total of 2 pieces. Then follow this line. Sew around this side and the front. This side has an opening. This part of the collar is not stitched. Turn it over from here. While making the collar, you can adjust the stitch length to be smaller. This is how I do the sewing, like this, in a half circle. Then, once it's finished, turn it over. This seam needs a bit of trimming, the collar here at the neck of this piece. No trimming is required. This side needs trimming. Trim it down to 0, leave about half. Only one piece has been cut. That piece remains untouched, this corner. Fix it a bit. Then this is still a bit big. Then use tweezers to flip this corner over. There are no tweezers left. Just stack it with your hands. There are no tweezers left. Just stack it with your hands. Then use your hands to shape it well. This seam will be completely pulled out. This is organized well, then set it aside. Do this. Gather the rope. Gather the rope here at the waist of the garment. This rope is quite large. Actually, it can be trimmed a bit. Then make its sleeve opening and the side seam. Cut along the front. Don't go beyond this seam. Leave a little distance. Make the incision. Roll the sleeve hem. This will become a straight line. Then it's easier to do. Use your hand first. Press the seam to make an imprint. After it's done, press the eyebrow line. Once the armhole edges are trimmed like this, then fold up the side seams. Then turn it to the front to have a look. The one with the cord is the front center. Then sew the front center like this. This is the bodice of the lining. The one with the cord is the front. Sew the back together for me. Then below is the skirt that attaches to it. First pull out the paper for the skirt. Roll one edge, then pull the paper out and piece it together. This way, according to its seam allowance, roll the edge 0.5, then press the lines of the two papers. Then start using shredded paper. Pull it to match its knot, adjust them to the same length. Then tie a knot at one end. A knot is tied on this side, then it aligns. Find this side for comparison. Then pull it to the same length. Almost. Then tie this end to secure it. If you're concerned about needing adjustments later, you can tie a slip knot. You can take it apart later, then adjust it again. Adjust the uniformity of the paper. After it's ready, just stitch it together. This is how to assemble it. At this point, we should wrap it up. It might be slightly longer. It's not that much. Just cut it off. Like this. And there's one more thing. It's very important. It's this one. When it is stitched together, here in the back center, here around 1.5 has no folds. This side too. The same goes for the skirt, around the face. The bottom skirt is done. Let's set it aside for now. Now let's start making the face. Let's first talk about this fake prism in front. The width of this fake prism is 0.7, folded in half, following this drawn center line. It's also fine if you don't draw the center line. Just take this piece, fold it directly in half, then find a reference point. Find a point on the top, find a point on the bottom, approximately 0.7. Draw it this way, then press a line here. After pressing this 0.7 millimeter clear line, then open it. Do it like this. Do not leave any room. Open everything. Press another clear line like this. Secure it in place. 0.1 will suffice. When finished, it looks like this. This type of bright line, you can use this side. You can also use this side for it. Flip it over, then you decide. Keep the side that looks better. I'm keeping this sample garment. The side with the bright line. Then place this straight sample on it. First, draw a center line. We still need to find a center line, because during the cutting process, we need to align with this. The center line is based on this line to this edge. This will be considered its center. Then after finding it, align the center line of this piece with the center line on the board and align it with this. This line should be clear enough, then outline it. You can extend this provincial line a little further. Then this one, the aligned line, outline it. You can extend this provincial line to extend it down. You can sew it together once it's cut out. This is what I drew at the beginning. Draw this dart on the front. Then you need to consider if you want to keep this side as the front, you can take in the dart from this front side. Then if you want to, then turn this side over. Then draw this dart on the back. This is the mark of the high-dimensional disappearing pen. If you don't have an iron, you can also use hair straighteners. I have tried it myself, just a little bit. Just press it a little on top. It will be gone. Then start saving now. I forgot to film this part. After finishing saving, you need to cut off the excess parts. Leaving about 0.3 to 0.2 is also fine. Then this front piece is tapered. After it is gathered, make its pointed stitching. Like this. Sew the two together. This way, it is stitched well. Let's talk about the seam allowance. The seam allowance of these two pieces. The seam allowances of the two pieces face inward. Then press it open with the pointed seam. These two pointed seams pull it apart, like this. Then the next step is to attach the sleeves, like this. The sleeves should face the pleats. Then sew it together with the armhole. The sleeves should face the pleats. Then sew it together with the armhole. This is how the sleeve looks. This point is for the sharp seam. This point is a marker. It is for the front piece, because when you're making it, it's easy to get confused. It cannot be distinguished. Then I do it this way, a point in the middle, and then one for the front armhole, the one that hasn't been changed. It naturally is the back armhole. First, stitch 2 cotton threads towards the gathers. The spacing of the 2 cotton threads is 0.5 centimeters, a little bit inward, then place one in between, then start pulling. Pull the gathers, pull to the same length as the armhole. The pleats are distributed on the sleeve. They are all concentrated on the sleeve, then at the midpoint of the armhole. The position of the bottom arc, folded in half, up to this point. This side has no pleats. Then after it has fixed the shape, you can take a look. This is how it is. Like this. When stitching, it is the reverse side point to point. Then align the front armholes with each other. You can secure it at the sleeve area first. Sew a stitch like this first. Don't worry about this pleat for now. Sew a stitch like this first. In any case, the sewn parts can be sewn directly. This hand sewing is more precise. Then adjust the amount of pleats. Because the curve of this sleeve is quite large, you can trim this section longer. To create the cut, let's make 3 cuts, right at the point of the greatest curve. Otherwise, it will be easy when attaching the sleeve. Adjust the amount of pleats. Instead, place the pleat amount on top. The curved sections do not have pleats. This is the back. You can also adjust this part at the back. Adjustments are made on the garment's cut, not on the sleeves. Then use your hand to measure the lengths. Then adjust to match the length. This is the thread. It is used to adjust its length using this gathering thread. If it's too short, just pull it a little longer. You should gather a little as it grows. It's very easy to do it this way. It's finished on the sleeve. Next, attach this sleeve head. This is the back side. Then it's gathered just like the sleeve. Gather it to match this length, then join them together. This sleeve is also pressed to 2 lines. Then gather it to match this length. You can tie a knot at one end, you can tie a knot at one end, then adjust the other end. This is a double line gather. When pulling the line, you can only pull one side. This side is pulled while keeping this side still. Don't pull this side, otherwise it will get locked. You won't be able to pull it anymore. This way, it will be the same length. Then sew the two together. After the sleeve head is attached, then roll back 0.5 along this seam edge. Press a seam, press a seam. After the sleeves are processed, do not sew the side seams yet. This back piece, this line is its back garment. Then this line is actually the center line. It can be designated as the button placket. When sewing the button, position it on this line. Then the collar should also go up to this line. You can find a mark at the top, then the collar will go up to here. About 1 centimeter from the edge, 1 centimeter from the edge. It's best to follow this. 1 centimeter might be slightly too large. There's not much of a difference. Then this collar has a center point. The midpoint should align with this center line. Sew it like this. Once the collar is finished, create a nice pointed hole for it, like this. This is how it will look when flipped over. This collar will look nicer when turned inside out. Otherwise, it will just struggle to get through. Then sew the side seam together, this way. Sew all the way down from here. Oh, by the way, the seam of this sleeve faces upwards because this is how it can take shape, that puffed up effect. Otherwise, it will look flat when worn. It flips up this way. Then sew it like this. Sew on both sides. Sew here first and pause. Then sew back from this side. This one is sewn from here to here and then paused. Then turn it over and sew from this side. Sew the bottom edge here, then let this seam face down. Connect it with this. It's done like this after sewing. The orientation of this seam, it should be visible, right? The entire piece is blocking downward, and this one is blocking upward. This side follows the same method. This seam can be trimmed a little smaller. Don't make it too narrow. If it's too narrow, it might leak. This one is cut a bit too much. I couldn't see clearly. Don't cut it too small. This one is a bit small. Cut it to match this sleeve here. The width is approximately 0.3. And the fuzz on the inside needs to be trimmed clean. It should be easy to wear. Once it's done, you can turn it inside out. When wearing it, this seam might get pushed down, but once you have it on securely, you still need to raise this seam. This effect looks a bit better. When the whole piece is flipped over, it looks like this. Now that the upper body is done, let's set it aside. Then make the skirt. First, sew this skirt with the lace. Sew with a 0.5 seam allowance. Sew them together like this. Then flip it over and press the seams. After sewing it together this way. Flip this seam over and press it again. Look at the front and press down a thin line of 0.1. This way, two pleated lines are pressed. It is folded and gathered at the top. Then join it with the waist. Tie a segment into a knot. After folding it, proceed to the next step. Secure this section and tie a knot. This fold must be the same length as the waist. So this section is secured now, right? Then tie a knot in this section. Adjust the folds evenly again. After the adjustments are made, then stitch them together. After the skirt and waist are stitched together, it's still the same. The 1.5 spacing in the center back has no fold measurement. After the skirt is connected, first sew on the buttons, because after the bottom is finished, it will be difficult to sew on the buttons later. Let's draw it out first. Find a button position at the top, then find one at the bottom. Divide the middle one evenly. Split into 2 ends and 3 sections. Then you can attach the button in this position. It's best to nail this bead horizontally. I used to nail it vertically before. Now I've found that nailing it horizontally works better. The results will be better. Then securely attach a button. This is how to tie a knot. It can be done without cutting, but you need to tie a knot. Attach the first button at this position. Then continue sewing the next one. Like this. After these two are secured, they are all horizontal. Then now, regarding the fabric and the collar of the fabric and the collar near the face, connect together because the pointed hole will get bigger, so you should ensure this distance from the fabric. Also create a proper pointed hole for it. Here at the collar, do not cut through. Leave a little distance from the seam edge. Now its lengths are equal. Then align the center line, align this middle with the corresponding point, and then this part should be stitched together. Sew the neckline this way. The back center is sewn the same way. Then add some embroidery to this corner. Fold the corner this way, then place it over there. When placed correctly, it looks like this. This corner needs to be folded neatly. It should be a bit sharper. Then press down a line here, a small amount of thread. Secure this lining inside. After securing this top stitch, you can add the Velcro. Now, the Velcro should be placed at the buttocks position, which is at the midpoint of this arrangement. Locate a point. They are opposite each other, equal length. Then when you apply it, pay attention to this point. This side, the left side is its hook side, the right side is the fuzzy side. Then put this inside. Press from the outside. Watch as you press from the outside. Stop when you press to here. Then turn. Leave this part long. Leave a section long. The same applies to the bottom. Trim it at the end. After finishing this side, then do this side. This fuzzy side goes on this side. Put it on the back side. Isn't this supposed to go inside? Like this, it's flipped over. It goes on the outside, then start, press it down here. The Velcro on this side, I start sewing from this side, sew from the bottom up, sew to here. Then turn and sew downwards. This mark can be made a bit longer. Otherwise, if it's covered, it will be invisible. Then you can trim it. The edges can be cut a bit smoother and more rounded because it can easily scratch the fabric. This is how you place it. Adhere it together, align it top and bottom, then place the base plate in the areas without Velcro, secure it in place. Then stitch a line like this. After alignment, then turn here, align the waist section like this, align the collar here, then align the bottom. Smooth it down here. They are both on the same line. This way it overlaps by about 1 centimeter. In short, it is consistent with the above. Then start securing from here. Press this 0.1 line here. Then turn and take this. Go back and forth a few times with reverse stitches. Like this, fix it here, then come here, turn and make a few stitches to secure the reverse stitches. Then this garment is completed. Now let's start making the apron. There's one more thing. This inner part, the seam here, is that the lining is longer than the outside. Its inner part will be longer than this waist by a bit. They are not aligned. If aligned, it will make the waist look very thick. So when making it, be sure not to align them together. This way it will be on top. This seam is on the top, then this seam is at the bottom. It is just staggered. Then make this outer apron. This area in the front needs to be folded before cutting. This piece is as follows. According to this line, each line is folded in half, then press down about 0.2. That is half of it, a little smaller than half of it. Start pressing from the left side, press it to the right side. After this one is pressed well, then fold the second one over. Continue. After all 4 of these are pressed well, then divide it equally. Each find the midpoint. Start from the middle. 2 lines on the left, 2 lines on the right. Use this one in the middle as a peephole, then sew on the button. This is its plate. Then it's best to press it with an iron. Completely open this fold. It should not have. In other words, the part that is inside. When you pull it open, the front of your chest will enlarge. Then this center should align with the center. You can find a midpoint here, but don't draw. After drawing, you'll still need to clean it. It's too noticeable. Find a center point, then trace the outline. This is how it's done. Cut it out, that works. Before you cut, it's best to do this. Press a line along this pleat, secure it a bit to prevent it from opening up later. This pleat will come apart when pulled. This makes it safer. The inner and outer sides are the same. This section on the front chest is wound-tourding. The one with tight pleats is the facial part, and this is the inner part. Sew these two together. Look, these are 2 pieces. This side is the inside. This side is the outside. Do it like this, turn it over, then set it aside. Let's discuss how to cut the shoulder and back. This black adhesive on the shoulder is what I have just cut. I'm using this special fabric. No, I'm actually using this one. Eyelash lace. Its width is exactly 1.5 centimeters. Then, it is this side that has lace. Place it along this straight line. Then this side of the arc needs to be trimmed is just right, not too much at all. Then cut it like this. This way is a bit safer. The inner part and the outer part are the same. This part on the front chest with tight seams is the outer part. Then this is the inner part. They are stitched together. This consists of two pieces. This side is the inner side, and this side is the outer side. Do it this way. Turn it over. Then set it aside for now. Let me discuss how to cut the shoulder and back. The black edge on the shoulder is what I have just cut. I use this lace trim. Its width is exactly 1.5 centimeters. Then this side features the lace. Place it on this straight edge. Then the curved side needs to be trimmed. It's perfectly right. Perfectly right. Not at all too much. Then cut it down like this. Yu Qiansheng from last year. The straight side here has a bandsaw blade. And what about the curve? You need to cut it off with scissors. As for the inner part, it should be a bit shorter. The face is just fold the inner part inside. Do not let it show on the outside. Like this, then press 2 lines to fix it. Set this aside after it's done. Let's talk about this shoulder strap. Shoulder strap and dart. This shoulder strap does not go all the way up, so there needs to be a mark here. Up to this point, there are markings on this pattern. Then you need to draw it on the fabric piece. This folding line should be pressed well along 2 fold lines. It's slightly smaller than the seam position. Then crumple the folds. Find a midpoint here, fold it in half, draw a center line, then fold it. Then align it with its midpoint. The midpoint of the dart, aligns with the midpoint of the strap. Let's secure it for a moment, then we can rewind it like this. Let's secure it first, then adjust the length of this fold. This fold should go up to here. It shows on the surface, right to the point you marked. So this shoulder part, it still needs to be sewn into this part when you find a width of about 0.5. And then since it's sewn up to here, when it turns, after it's sewn together, it's just right after opening. It reaches this point here, it's like this. And then this fold needs to be adjusted evenly. It's the same here. It is the same. You can give it a width. The indirect width is set to 0.5. Then a line here. You can also fix it first. Maybe, then a line here. You can also fix it first. It's not necessary either. Anyway, you can just roughly compare it by hand. Because it's secured in the middle, the 2 ends will be fine. Then sew a line like this to hold it down. It's sewn this way. Then when you flip it over, you'll see that this point aligns just right here. This is slightly off. It's fine. Just a moment, because we still need to sew another line. Just fix it to this band first. Then do the other one in the same way. It also involves cutting paper and splicing it together. I thought of a way. Just a moment. I'll mark a point on this. Then take this point after you finish drawing it later. Join it together with it. You won't have to look for it yourself. Once you've spliced it like this, then this side is stitched to the front chest. It's the same as this one. After both sides are sewn like this, then create another strip. In total, there are 4 strips. Then flip it over. Just fold this flying edge. Place the front chest piece in the middle. Like this. Make sure not to sew it incorrectly. I'm sewing this side first. This strap, it's 2 straps. First attach the flying edge to one strap, then secure it to the front chest, then add the second one and the one with the flying edge. Sandwich the front chest in between. Both are done the same way. Then, after everything is done, fold it back like this. Press a seam line here. Let's trim this first because it's too wide. Press the seam later. Let's trim off half first. This side too. Once it's properly cut, follow this seam allowance. Fold it back by 0.5 centimeters. It folds back by 0.5. This side also folds back by 0.5. It can be folded. So still follow the seam allowance, then fold it in half. Then press a brow line like this. 0.1 is sufficient. The brow line on this side is complete, and this side is the same. Let's make another one. Also fold the seam back, then fold the seam over on this side as well. Then they are folded in half. This way, the dart is wrapped inside. After pressing it down like this, just fold it back again. Then press the seam like this. This part of the front chest and the shoulder straps are done. This is how it is. Then we'll attach it to the waist shortly. This waist has two parts. All of them have been marked. This is where the shoulder strap goes. This part connects to this one. Then this is the center, like this at the center. Align with the center point of this. Take a rough visual estimate, then first sew the two together. After this side is done, then add another waist piece. This way they align. Clamp this front chest piece in the middle. Right? Put that there. Before it is put on another one, this needs to align with it. Right? The position for the shoulder strap. Don't twist it like this. I fixed it like this with my hand, like this. Then put this shoulder strap on, then put this other one around the waist. Then sew it back like this. Once this is clipped properly, this part of the front waist, the waistline is connected to the skirt hem. This needs a lace attachment. This is the hem of the apron. This small lace is spliced with the bottom edge of this skirt. With a seam allowance of 0.5. After the splicing is done, turn it over, and then sew a cotton line of 0.1 to flip this seam over. After this bottom edge is processed, this also involves sewing two lines. Then adjust it to match this length. Then stitch them together. Just make sure the adjustments are even. You can tie a slip knot here. It's the same method as for the hem. If the back is too long, just a little too long, you can simply tear it off. Just sew it like this. Then for the waist here, roll it back by 0.5 according to the seam allowance. Yes, let's start with this side. Roll it back 0.5 like this. Make it thick here. Don't make it too small. Otherwise, the waist will be too small. Then let it flow down smoothly. Just like on my side. Roll it over. Then stitch down a 0.1 cotton thread. Stitch down a 0.1 cotton thread. After handling the thickness on both sides like this, then the seam allowance is folded back. Then you can sew like this with a hand needle. You can also lay a cotton thread down from this side. This is the fastest way, but the result, I think hand sewing is still better. Sometimes it might miss a stitch, you just can't see that side anymore. You just start sewing from this side, it's easier to sew. Fold it back a little longer. This way it's hard to miss. This seam is finished hand sewing, and these are two different techniques. I used hand sewing for the first item, like this. And what about this one? It has a cotton thread pressed underneath. I pressed this side a little. Then you can add another one above. This way, both sides will be consistent. The effect of the belt sewn by the sewing machine is like this. If there are those who sew by hand, there is no need for top stitching here. After stitching on one side, it's fine. In this case, the stitching will show on the outside. I won't discuss the method of using Velcro. It's the same as that skirt. It is sewn all the way through, like this. My side is the same, hooked side. This side is the fuzzy side. Why is this placed on the left side? Because if it is placed on this side, I've tried many times, it will stretch this side. If you put this in the seam below, the fabric won't affect it. This fabric will align with this length, so it's best to place it on the left. Take a look. Place it in the seam below. This will make it easier to sew. Currently, I'm not using Velcro. In other words, attach this decoration, adjust this bow a bit. It's not about tying it first and then sewing. It's about sewing it first, then tie the bow. Attach it in this position. First, secure the thread on this garment. It's just backstitching, just backstitch 2 stitches. Then put this, then attach this flower dart, then then secure a few stitches. Then shape it like this. Sew it a bit more securely. Then take this bow. Once it's secured, cut the thread, trim carefully, tie a bow like this. Then, according to your own preferences, make it however you like. I like to press it down, then fix it with a needle, then sew the key on it. You can shape it however you like. Isn't this bow going to stick up? Just use a hand needle to handle it. Then easily attach that pendant, sewed it on. This pendant is rather delicate. Be a bit careful while sewing. Avoid hurting your hand. Then secure this with a stitch. Conceal this inside. Once it's sewn, go back with a stitch. Sew the keychain pendant. This key goes in. Then in the end, if it still lifts up, sew it again. Push through here, then go back around. This way, it will be underneath. Then over here, reverse 1 stitch, then tie a knot to secure it. After sewing it up, cut off any excess threads, because this side doesn't have a lining, so it needs to be tidied up a bit. This apron is now complete. The length of the bow after it's sewn, after it's finished, then take this bow, take it out, the length of this bow, after sewing it up, after making the bow, then decide how long to keep it. This apron is done. Next is the headpiece. The button on this apron is the same as the dress. First, draw the button position, then sew on a bead, tie a knot, like this. Then below is the headdress. This is the front of the headdress. This is the hoop. The position of the headband. First, sew a headband here. Apply a woven ribbon on the surface above. There are alignment points on the pattern. Mark according to the pattern, then just sew it on. After the ribbon has been properly pressed, put it aside first. First, handle this raw edge. The raw edge here is rolled first. These 2 edges should be rolled up. This is part of the headband, the upper part of the raw edge. After rolling the edges, sew the 2 sides this way. Sew it first, at the 2 points, the 2 edges of this headband. Sew them together first. When both sides are completed, then turn it inside out. Turn it inside out, gathering. Like this. This straight edge is the part that needs gathering. Press 2 clear lines to gather the pleats. After pressing the lines, then gather the pleats to match this length, the same length. because they need to be stitched together. This needs to be secured. It needs to be folded in half. Then mark a center point. It's opposite to this center point. This is how it looks in the middle. Just fold it and do it. This type is quite handy to use. Sew a stitch in the middle to connect. Whether it's the sleeves or the skirt hem, it's practical for both the sleeves and the hat. Fold it in half at the center, then you can forget about it. Just adjust this length and you're good to go. Make sure they are the same length. It shouldn't go all the way to the top, to this seam here. This side cannot go all the way. Just leave a little distance here. Can you see clearly? There is a 0.5 seam here. Then this dart only sews to this point of the seam, a little closer to the inside, because this part will be sewn shut soon. Adjust to the desired length, then tie a knot to secure it. After securing it here, adjust the pleats again, make it even. Once it's done, you can sew it together. This side is done the same way. Attach this dart to the headband. There should be a seam distance from the headband. This seam needs to be folded back. Fold this here. Fold it back by 0.5, then like this. Also along the 0.5 line, this one too, just fold all the seams, then fold it in half again. Sew it together like this. This has been cut short, leave it a bit longer. Wrap this ribbon inside. This follows the line in. Fold back all the seams, all are folded back by 0.5 units. Then fold it in half again. Make sure this covers perfectly. Cover this line. Then use a hand needle to stitch. Sew from here all the way to here. Leave these two openings for now. Sew it up at the end. This side as well. Don't sew them all shut. Put this inside first. This makes it easier to handle. Place this here, then clamp it. Start sewing from this end. Sew to this end. Don't sew this part shut yet, because in a moment we still need to put a piece of hard paper in for shaping. It's best to leave these two of equal length. Both sides are of the same length. In this way, it doesn't matter if you sew it shut. It might just attach this part to the top here. You can either do it at the end. You can also use a needle to thread it in. If you sew it like this, you need to be more careful. Both sides should be of equal length. When this stitching reaches the end, you can secure this end. Then you can tie a knot as well. Later use black thread. That's fine too. Wait a moment, hold it with pepper. Then at this end, you can secure it, but the opening at the other end should be kept open. Otherwise, you won't be able to put anything inside. At this end here, insert this hard cardboard, insert the plastic sheet. Then this shape will be improved. It's not the soft, fluffy kind. After placing this board in, you can sew this opening shut. This way, this headband will have its main part completed. Then there will also be a bow on top, and it will be sewn with its beads. This bow is the same as the one on the headband. Then use it to make a decorative bow. The width is approximately 2 centimeters. Then use a needle to fasten it. Thank you for watching. Then sew 2 stitches in a circle, twist it, place it in the center, and pull tightly. It's not very firm. Then pass this stitch through. As long as you can create a fox knot, any method is fine. You might do it better than I can. Then pass through again, a bit higher up on this side, and sew on another bead. Sew the first stitch for this bead, then sew another stitch to secure it and make it a little sturdier. Then flip it over here, make a stitch on the fox knot, and tie a knot. Wow, the stitching is really tight. Once this side is done, tie a knot to secure it, then cut it off. Then trim off the longer part as well. Then, use a lighter to fluff up the fibers a bit faster. It's fine if you don't fluff them, just don't touch them and they won't fray. Then do the same for the other one. Once done, use tape to stick it together. Just cover this area as much as possible. Place it this way based on your preference. I prefer it inward. Some also have it directed outward. This way it blocks more, and you can't see the areas where the threads are exposed. You can sew directly on top with a hand needle after finishing the beads, but it might be tricky to find the right position and may not be accurate when done. You can decide where to stick it after finishing the product, and that's quite nice too. But once it's stuck, it stays stuck. Don't change it, because if you tear it off, it will just rip and be wasted. This headband is done, and the bow on the socks is made in the same way. Once this bow is made, you can sew it directly onto the socks using either a glue needle or a hand needle. Let me reiterate about the socks. The method for making them is different from before. The cutting of the socks is also quite simple. First, find a yarn-like line. This ribbed fabric has distinct front and back sides as well. This side is the front and this side is the back. Then find a yarn-like line, which serves as the center line. Otherwise, the fabric's grain will be slanted. Place this here, align the center line with the drawn line, and then outline it. If placed carelessly, the sock will twist after sewing. This outline is somewhat light. It hasn't been drawn too dark. It's not a big deal anyway, as they all need washing. When washing the sock, it's best not to rub it. Soak it in water, and the marks will come off. After twisting or rinsing, it can easily lose its shape. If the mark is lighter, dabbing it with a wet tissue will easily remove it. This is 0.5. After cutting this, place the front side up, then roll one 0.5 and another 0.5. Then sew it with a needle to secure this edge. I used a hand needle for this fabric. It's easy to stretch, which will make the sock's opening larger. This is how the hand stitch is secured. Then turn it over, hold this line in place, and stitch it up. This sock is hand stitched, and you need to trim half of the stitches. Then turn it over, and you can either stitch the bow decoration on top or use glue. This is what it looks like from the front, and it fits a bit tighter on the leg. Then this sock is finished. I won't explain the bow part. It's the same as what I mentioned earlier. It just needs to be a bit narrower, about 1.5 in width. There's one more important thing I haven't mentioned. For this skirt, both hems need to be tidied up after they're done. The hem might fray, so it should be made to follow the grain like this. Avoid pulling it to the seams, as it can easily unravel. Pull it down like this to straighten it out, making its drape look smooth and vertical to the ground. This fabric is also very easy to work with. You can handle it however you like. Now, its drape is straight, and that's all there is to it. By the way, if you need to soak it and wash it, this key will come off if it gets wet while drying. Then dry this key with a paper towel, or if you pin it, I'm not sure if it will rust. Then this set is done, including the headpiece and socks. That's it. Let's make the outer apron again. The front part here needs to be folded before cutting. This piece is aligned with this line. Each line is folded in half, then press down approximately 0.2. That is half of it. It's a little smaller than half. Start pressing from the left to the right. After this line is pressed down, then fold the second line over. Continue. After pressing all 4 strips down like this, then divide it evenly. Each find the center, starting from the middle. 2 on the left, 2 on the right. Use the middle one as the guide, then sew on the buttons. This is its panel. Then it's best to press it with a board. Completely open this pleat. Avoid including parts that are merely present inside. When you open it up, the chest will appear larger. Then align this to the center. You can find a central line here, but it's better not to draw it. After drawing, you'll have to wash it. It's too apparent. Locate a midpoint. Then trace the outline. This is how to draw it. Just cut it out and it's done. Before cutting, it's best to press this pleated area. Press a line to fix it. To avoid it coming apart later when cut, this pleat will open up with a pull. This way is a bit safer. The inside and the outside are the same. This part is the front chest. The one with the gap is the front. Then this is the inner part. They are sewn together. This is made of 2 pieces. This side is the inner, and this side is the outer. After doing this, turn it over, then set it aside. Let me talk about the cutting of the shoulder and back. This thick adhesive on the shoulder is what I have just cut. I used this Velcro, it's not this one. Cutting edge, its width is exactly 1.5. Then it's this side with trim. It's placed along this straight line. Then the curved side needs to be cut. It's just right. Just right. Not too much at all. Then cut it like this. After all, the straight side has serrations. Then the curved part is needed. Cut it down with scissors. The inner part is a little shorter. The face part involves tucking the inner part inside. Keep it hidden on the outside, like this. Then stitch 2 lines to secure it. Set this aside once it's done. Now let's discuss this shoulder strap. Strap and dart. This strap doesn't go all the way up, so there needs to be a mark here. Up to this point, there are markings on this pattern. Then it needs to be drawn on the fabric piece. Press 2 fold lines into this gathering, slightly smaller than the sewing position, then gather the fold. Find a midpoint here and fold it in half. Draw a center line, then fold. Then align it with its midpoint. The midpoint of this dart aligns with the midpoint of the strap. Let's secure it for a moment. This way, go back for a moment to secure it, then adjust the length of this fold. This fold should go up to here. It is what is visible on its surface. Just reach the point you marked. So this tip still needs to be sewn into this part. When you find a width of about 0.5, and it's just because the seam is sewn here, when this part turns. Once it is stitched and then opened, it perfectly reaches this point here. This is how it is, and this fold should be adjusted evenly. This side is the same as well. You can also set a width for it. The indirect width is at 0.5. Then you can align and secure this here first. It's not really necessary. You can just roughly measure it by hand because it's secured in the middle. The ends can just be done roughly. Then sew a line like this to hold it down. It's sewn together like this. Then when you turn it over, you'll see this point aligns perfectly here. This is almost there. It's okay. Wait a moment, because I still need to sew another one. Just fix it to this pointed strap for now. Then the other one is done the same way. It's also made of scrap paper and then pieced together. I thought of a method. Wait a moment. I will mark a point here. Then take this point. After you finish drawing, piece it together with this. Then there's no need to look for it yourself. After stitching it together like this, then sew this side to the front chest. It's the same as this. After sewing both sides like this, then make another shoulder strap. There are a total of 4 shoulder straps, then turn it over to attach this edge. Clamp this front chest part in the middle, like this. Don't sew it wrong. I'm going to sew this side first. This way you'll have 2 shoulder straps. First, attach the binding to one shoulder strap. Then, secure it with the front panel. Next, attach the second strap to this binding. Place the front panel in between. Both are done in the same way. Then, once everything is ready, fold it back like this. Create a brow line here. Let's trim this first because it's too wide. We'll press the line again later. Let's trim off half first. Do the same on this side. After cutting, fold it back 0.5 centimeters along this seam. Fold it back 0.5 centimeters. This side also folds 5 centimeters. You can fold it gently along the seam, then fold it in half. Then press an eyebrow line of 0.1 centimeters like this. The brow line here is pressed well. Then it's the same on this side. Let's make another one. Also sew and fold it back. Then sew and fold it over on this side too. Then fold both of them in half. This way you wrap the flying whip inside. After pressing it tightly like this, just fold it back. Then press the line like this. The front chest part and the shoulder straps are done. It's just like this. Then we'll stitch it to the waist later. There are a total of 2 parts for the waist. Marks have been made on both. This is where the shoulder strap goes. Connect here and here. Then this is the middle. Align the middle like this with the midpoint of this. Take a rough measurement, then stitch them together first. Once this side is finished, attach the other waistband. This way they will be aligned. Clamp this front chest piece in the center. Yes, then place that one. Before attaching the other one, this needs to be aligned with it. Align it with the shoulder strap's position. This way, make sure it doesn't get twisted. I secured it like this with my hand, like this. Then put on this shoulder strap, then put this other one around the waist. Then put it back like this. After this is clipped, this front waist and the waistline connects with the skirt hem. This needs to be attached with a lace. This is the hem of the apron. This small lace is stitched to the bottom edge of the skirt, 0.5 seam. Flip it over after the stitching is done. Then press a 0.1 cotton thread. Bend this seam down. After handling the bottom edge, this also involves pressing 2 lines. Then gather to the same length as this, then stitch them together. As long as it is adjusted evenly, you can tie a slip knot here. It's the same method as for the skirt hem. If the back is too long, it's just a bit long, you can simply tear it off. Just sew it like this, then press the seams at the waist, roll it back by 0.5. Yes, start with this side, roll it back like this by 0.5. Make this part thick. Don't reduce its size, otherwise the waist will end up being small. Then the bottom will fall into place. Just like what I have here, roll it up, then secure a 0.1 cotton thread. After processing both sides to be thick like this, fold this seam back. Then you can stitch by hand like this. You can also thread a cotton line through from this side. This is the quickest method. However, hand sewing still yields better results. Sometimes it might skip stitches. Then you won't see that side. It's preferable to start sewing from this side. Fold it back a bit longer than this. This way it's less likely to get missed. This stitching is complete, hand sewing, and these are 2 different techniques. The first item I sewed was with hand pulling, like this. Then this one has a cotton thread pressed underneath it. Press down on this side, then you can add another one on top. This way both sides are aligned. This is how the belt sewn by the sewing machine looks. For those who sew by hand, you don't need to press the seam here. After pulling the seam on this side, it's good to go. In this case, the exterior will show visible seams. I won't go into how to make the Velcro. It's the same as that skirt. It's stitched all the way through, like this. This side of mine has the same hook side. This side is the fuzzy side. Why is this placed on the left? Because if it's placed here, I've tried many times, and it stretches this side. If you place this at the bottom to sew, this fabric will not interfere with it. This fabric will follow this length. Therefore, it's best to position it on the left. Make sure to sew it at the bottom. This will make sewing easier. I'm not using Velcro right now, so that means attaching this decoration. Let's make this bow. This is not tied beforehand before sewing. First sew it well, then tie the bow. Attach it in this position. First, secure the thread at this stitch. It's just backtracking a stitch. Just backtrack 2 stitches. Then this is to attach this piece. Then attach this lace. Then secure it with a few more stitches. Then make it look like this. Sew it a bit tighter. Then, after you have secured the bow well, cut the thread with a pair of fine scissors. Tie a bow, like this. Then, based on your own preferences, make it however you like. I usually press it down, then secure it with a needle. Then you can attach the key. Just shape it into your preferred form. Isn't this bow going to rise up? Just shake it by hand to adjust it. Then I sewed that pendant on easily. This pendant is relatively delicate. Be cautious while sewing. Be careful not to injure your hands. Then secure this with a stitch. Conceal this inside. Once it's sewn up, make a back stitch, sewing the key pendant. This key is inserted. Then if it still bends in the end, sew it again. Go through the front and then loop back. This way it will be underneath, and this side is the same. Sew this key on, then sew this key on again, then sew this key on again. This way it will be positioned underneath. Then go back a stitch here, then tie a knot to secure it. Then after finishing the sewing, cut off the excess threads, because this side doesn't have a lining, so it needs to be tidier. This apron is complete. After sewing the length of the bow, after finishing the bow, then decide how long to leave it. This apron is good. Next is the headdress. The buttons sewn on this apron, it's the same as the skirt. First, draw the button positions, then attach a bead, make a knot this way. Then we have the headdress next. This is the front part of the headdress. This is the hair hoop, the position of the hair hoop. First, we need to sew one here for the headband. Press a woven strap on the surface above. There are alignment points on the woven pattern. Follow the markings on the woven pattern, then just sew it according to that. After the woven strap is pressed, set it aside for now. Let's start by handling this dart. For the dart, we first need to roll the edges. Roll these two edges up. This is part of the headband, the upper part of the dart. After rolling the edges, sew the two sides together like this. At the two edges of the headband. Sew them together first. When both sides are sewn, then turn it over and gather the pleats. Like this. This straight edge is the part that needs to be gathered. Press two clear lines to gather the pleats. After pressing the lines, then gather the pleats until it's the same length as this, because they need to be stitched together. This needs to be struck. It should be folded in half. Then draw a central point. It is opposite this central point. This way, the center remains like this, the folding technique. This type is more practical. Secure a stitch in the center. Whether it's a sleeve or a skirt hem, this is practical for hats as well. Fold it in half. You don't need to worry about it anymore. Just adjust this length, adjust it to be the same length. It shouldn't reach the end. To this seam here. This side shouldn't go all the way. Just leave a little distance here. Can you see clearly? This side there's a seam of 0.5 here. Then this dart only stitches at this point of the seam, slightly towards the inside, because we need to sew it up here later. Adjust it to the desired length, then tie a knot to hold it in place. Once this end is secured, adjust it again. Make it uniform. Once it's ready, you can sew it together. This side is done in the same manner. Connect this dart to the headband. There is a gap equivalent to a seam from the headband. This seam needs to be folded back. Fold this to here, fold it back by half, then like this, also along this half line, this one too. Just fold all the seams, then fold it in half again. Sew it together like this. This one is cut short, leave it a bit longer, wrap this ribbon inside. This one follows the input line. Fold all the seams back, all are folded back by 0.5. Then fold it in half again. Cover this just right. Cover this line. Then use a hand needle to stitch. Sew from here all the way to here. Leave this opening for now. Sew it up at the end. Don't fully sew this side either. Let's put this inside first. This makes it easier to handle. Put this here, then pinch it. Start sewing from this end. Sew to this end. Don't sew this part down yet because we're going to put a mark in soon for shaping. It's best to keep these two even. They should be the same length. Both sides should be the same length. In this way, it doesn't matter if you sew it down, it might end up fixing this. Fixed on top of it, you can either do it at the end. You can also use a needle to get it in. If you sew it this way, you need to be more careful. The lengths on both sides should be equal. When this seam gets to the end, you can close this end by sewing it shut. Then you can tie a knot as well. Use black thread afterwards. That's fine too. Later, just tie a fox knot to wrap it up. Then you can secure this end, but the opening at the other end should be left because you won't be able to insert anything later. Okay, in this section, insert the hard cardboard and plastic sheet. Then the shape will be better, not that soft type. Once this board is in place, you can sew up the opening. This way, the main part of the hairband is done. Then there's the sewing of a bow and beads on top. This bow is the same as the one on the hairband. Then, use it to create a decorative bow. The width is approximately 2 centimeters. Then use a needle to fasten it. Then sew 2 stitches and make a wrap. Align it, position it in the center, and then pull tightly. It's not very secure. Then pass this stitch through. As long as you can make a bow, any method will work. You might do it even better than I did. Then pass through again a bit closer to the top and sew on another bead. For this bead, sew the first stitch, then make another stitch to secure it and ensure it is a bit sturdier. Then turn this over and sew a stitch on the bow, tying a knot. Wow, it's sewn very tightly. This side is done. Tie the knot, secure it, and cut it off. Then also trim off the long part. Then quickly touch the fur with a lighter. It's fine if it gets knocked off, just don't touch it and it won't fray. Then do the same with the other one, and once it's done, use a glue stick to attach it. Just try to cover this area as much as you can. Place it like this according to your preference. I usually have it facing inward, while others may have it facing outward. This way, it can cover more and you won't see the exposed threads. You can sew this directly on after finishing the beads with a needle, but I'm worried about not having the freedom to find the right position and that it won't be accurate after sewing. Once you finish the product, you can decide where to attach it, which is quite good. But once this is stuck, it shouldn't be changed. If you tear it off, it will rip and be ruined. This hairband is finished, and the bow on the sock is made the same way. After making this bow, you can sew it directly onto the sock using either a glue needle or a hand needle. Let me reiterate about the socks. The method for making them is different from before, and it's quite simple. For cutting the socks, first find a piece of yarn. This ribbed fabric has both a front and a back side. This side is the front, and this is the back. Then find a piece of yarn. This is its center line. Otherwise, the silk thread will end up slanted. Place this here, and the center line is the one you drew. Then draw the separation. If placed carelessly, the sock will twist after sewing. The outline is somewhat light, not drawn too heavily, but that's fine since it will all be washed anyway. It's best not to rub this while washing. Just soak it in water for a bit, and the water will remove the pen marks. After twisting or rinsing, it can easily become misshapen. If the marks are lighter, a damp paper towel will easily remove them. This is 0.5. After cutting this out, place it on the front side, then roll it to 0.5 and roll another 0.5. Then use a needle to sew it slightly to secure this edge. For this fabric, I used a hand needle. The sewing machine can easily stretch it, making the sock's opening larger. This is how the hand needle is secured. Then flip it over, hold this edge, and use the sewing machine. This is how the hand needle is secured. This is how the hand needle is secured. Then flip it over, hold this edge, and you can sew it on. This sock is hand sewn, and then the stitches are trimmed halfway. This sock is hand sewn, and then the stitches are trimmed halfway. Then flip it over, and you can sew the bow decoration on top or use glue. This is what the front looks like, and it fits a bit tighter on the leg. And then this sock is ready. I won't discuss the bow here. It's the same as I mentioned before. It's just that its width is a bit narrower, around 1.5. It's just that its width is a bit narrower, around 1.5. There's one more important thing I haven't mentioned. Both hems of this skirt need to be adjusted after they are made. The hem might flare out, so it needs to be made to flow smoothly along the silk. Don't pull to this seam position as it can easily fray. Like this, pull down to straighten it for a smooth hem. It gives a sense of verticality to the ground. This is the same. This type of fabric is very easy to work with. You can handle it any way you want. Then its hem is straight, and that's fine. By the way, there's this. If we want to soak it, we need to wash it with water. When we let this key dry, if it touches some water, it will come off. Then wipe this key dry with a paper towel, or you can use a thick cloth on this key. I don't know if it will rust from exposure to water. And then this set is complete, the headpiece and the socks. That's fine.